for the opening of this Indigenous informed interview with you, Rob. Welcome. First, really welcome to the space. And I would like to start with acknowledging the land, our ancestral lineages, the medicines, including the one which brought us together, the Amanita Muscaria. So if that would feel okay with you, would you like to start with acknowledging your Celtic, Irish, ancestral lineages, your land?
Yes, of course. Guramila Mahagut for inviting me to this call today. And yeah, just grounding in and asking for guidance and yeah, just creating space for my ancestors to, yeah, just to to come from a space of presence and to allow that presence be a breath of their wisdom and just to thank the land and the amazing Amanita Muscaria for helping me um, to be where I am right now. Kuramila.
Thank you so much for this beautiful, deep acknowledgement and prayer. And I'd like to acknowledge my ancestral lineage, the Germanic, Celtic, Basque lineage, all lineages from this planet, but also from other spaces too. I'm grateful, so grateful for you, Mother Earth, and all these beautiful living beings, from the stones to all plants, trees, animals, including you, the mushrooms. And I'd like to invite you, Spirit of Amanita Muscaria, and all the Amanitas here into the space, also asking for guidance, for blessings, for communicating with us, through us, and being part of this Indigenous informed interview for the study, for my Amanita study. All nature spirits, all the elements, feel welcome.
Oh,
Thank you so much. Just before we go a little bit deeper, would you like to share a tiny little bit how Amanita Muscaria came into your life, how long you've been working with it, how you
yeah.
typically work with it?
Yeah. So going back now almost 6 years when I first met her in a woods not too far away from here, actually. I'm in North Wexford, Loch Garman, um, just south of the Garden County of Ireland, Wicklow, where I had spent 40 years previous to that living in the city. And it was only at the start of COVID that I was working for myself. Um, and so I just had kind of got out of the corporate world and I had the opportunity to okay, this is something I can kind of work with. I don't have to be, locked into a city where we can't do much anything anyway. And so yeah, an opportunity came for me to move into the country and oh, I mean the timing was just incredible just in terms of where my personal development was kind of going into a space of more connection with nature and myself ultimately. And I moved to a an idyllic thatched Irish cottage. I think it was probably around 400 years old, protected building. And my partner at the time, we both moved in, and it was on really like, I mean, it wasn't official sacred land, but the guy that we had, um, he was a bit of a storyteller and a bit of a wizard. He was kind of like just sharing a lot about, ley lines and other stories. It was very magical. It was very kind of like, oh, there was just this excitement in the air. And I had just began a creative writing course with a lady who calls herself Leia Lam. And it was around, creating your own mythos, your own origin story. That was the program. And this was a big step out of my comfort zone, Nora. I was kind of not, I was just tapping into mythology and the other world and looking at things a little bit differently. And I found it really difficult to get into the zone of writing a story, my origin story. I just had this block. I just didn't, I really struggled with it. And I'd heard about this mushroom, the Amanita Muscaria, probably a year previous. I mean, obviously, I'd seen it, through modern culture and through, the toadstools and fairy kind of books and Christmas. I was very much embedded in my subconscious there. It only came on my radar as a mushroom that might have some psychedelic effect. Probably a year before when my friend told me he found one. So that was like, oh, I didn't even know they were a real thing, in Ireland. And so it was for when I remember moving to Wicklow, and I remember thinking, because I was into the other little mushrooms, the Liberty Caps at the time, so I was familiar with them. And I loved going into nature and doing foraging for other mushrooms as well. So this was just a new kind of adventure for me, and I had time. And anyhow, so coming back to the creative block, we were invited by Leia to go into the woods and sit by a tree and meditate and ask the woods, ask the tree um, for guidance. She gave us some prompts, and this was still a little bit out of my comfort zone, speaking to a tree. And anyhow, long story short, it was like a week or two into the course, and I was still, coming up against the brick wall, not being able to really make any headway on that creative block. And I was going for a walk in the woods, and all of a sudden my head just turned like to a strong right. I had seen like a little shimmering of what was this red and white mushroom, not just one. Like there must have been at least 50 of them. It was like I didn't know what I was seeing. And the excitement, went over to them, and I just like witnessed, and I just looked at them and I said, okay, what will I do here? What should I be doing? And so I went back to I went back to the house to get a basket. And I went back and I picked the whole mushrooms, and I brought them back that night. I didn't go near them. I didn't touch them. They were just left in a corner. I didn't have a clue what to do with them. And all of a sudden, Nora, I just started writing. It
Mm.
just overcame me. And I just started writing my origin story. And within a few hours, I had it nailed. It just streamed through me. And the theme of that origin story was the core of it was around forgiveness.
Mm.
That's what was present for me at that time. And I think it's just kind of interesting that that was the first message from the mushroom around forgiveness. Um,
Mm.
and so that was my first hello, Amanita Muscaria. And yeah, it expanded from there.
Mm. 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 How would you describe your relationship with Amanita Muscaria? You started with this first. How did it evolve over the years?
Yeah, so how it evolved, um, fairly shortly afterwards, I was curious, what a deep dive would look like.
Mm.
And I couldn't find much information. And this was very naive and foolish of me, um, to, you know, be thinking along those lines at the time. But anyway, there was still the fool in me, and I'm grateful that my gut reacted the way it did because I took a load of them raw. I maybe boiled them, I think, maybe 3 or 4 caps, and um, there was no, I didn't even dry them or anything. And within 15 minutes of me ingesting them, I purged. And I was so grateful I didn't try, because sometimes I think I may have had the thought that I'll keep this down, because this might be just like, a passing, but it was in my gut was just reacting. No, I was probably like way too much ibotonic in my body and the mushroom as well. So grateful for that, because it could have been a different story if it had stayed in my stomach altogether. So after that, I tuned into Amanita Dreamer. This is back in 2020, and
Mhm.
I would have started watching her videos first. I then reached out to several wisdom keepers in Ireland, and I didn't get much back. I met one guy, and he shared some beautiful advice with me that really has stayed with me to this day. And it very much aligned with my first experience, resonating with the idea that you don't need to ingest this mushroom to receive its benefits, its wisdom, its messages. You
Mm.
can just have it by your bedside and, set a little intention. And this is the magical thing about this mushroom. So he came with that kind of guidance, and that was really beautiful to receive. And so I started working with the tea element of it, and I started to immediately notice how relaxed and calm and grounded I felt. And I would occasionally have cups of tea every few weeks until my mushrooms ran out. And I think it was the next season that I knew, like, okay, the harvest is coming up, really looking forward to going out. There was this huge excitement about getting into the woods and finding these mushrooms. And I, it was just quite incredible because I hadn't heard of anybody else that had found such abundance. I found such treasures. Like, it was just outrageous, and I was like, okay, there's something to this. Why am I finding so many, and nobody else seems to be finding these mushrooms, but also talking about it? There was nobody in Ireland really, besides a lady, um, Hips and Hawes, Courtney Tyler. She was working with the mushroom, and I went to one of her workshops, I think, in the first year of finding out about Amanita. So I learned more about the mushroom through her, but she was coming from a very topical practice where it was more medicinal. It was more the healing from an external application. And I was always more curious about the psychoactive nature of the mushroom and how it can, help with our nervous system. So I started taking my studies deeper then after the second season. I met Vadim. I did a program with him. And then I started exploring the dried mushroom. Up until that point, the first year, I was just working with the tea. And the dried mushroom, Nora, really changed it for me,
Mm.
just in terms of the microdosing aspect. I hadn't at this point gone into any kind of deeper doses than that until maybe my second or third year. And so yeah, I mean, maybe I'll hold it there. I'll go and loop back to your question. There was your question around my relationship with the mushroom.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think just the way my brain works, I had a very slow. I mean, there was an immediate connection, but it was very hard for me to put words. It has always been hard for me to kind of, let's say, put a story behind connection. And but there was just this felt presence that there's something significant happening in this exchange, in this connection, and which led to the excitement of the inquiry of why has she presented herself to me? What am I supposed to do with this? And besides the obvious, the how it kind of benefited me in terms of it grounding me and feeling more kind of relaxed in my kind of beingness, which is, that's no small thing. That's been quite really the main thread in terms of the benefits. But I could go into how it's helped with my ADHD um, situation and how I have been able to just make better decisions in terms of staying away from the medication or getting off the medication very quickly, actually, and how it just improved my confidence as well. Just being able to practice presence and being comfortable in stillness.
This is so deep. I'm just feeling into which of the threads I like to
Yeah.
explore all. So, but maybe for the moment, we go back to the relationship and the kinship. Maybe for the moment, um, one of their major values, especially in indigenous informed communities, is reciprocity. This is something which might be missing in our more civilized Western academic world, especially. And um, if you feel into reciprocity and what you share, what's been maybe both, this rite of passage that you're still, if I understand it correctly, you're still in it, it's still continuing, and partly there's Amanita Muscaria, part is your own deep work. So how does reciprocity toward Amanita Muscaria and yourself look like? Or what comes to
Yeah.
your mind in terms of reciprocity?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different layers to reciprocity. I would say it's not always tangible reciprocity. It's very much it's for me it's a deep listening.
Mhm.
It's a deep listening to what I'm being called to in every I won't say every moment because that would be, you'd have to give your attention quite a lot. But just, you know what I mean? It's like, it's more relational, and attentional in the sense that I find, giving back is ultimately about honoring myself first,
Mm,
and ultimately at the same time it's in relationship to the outer world, and whether it's in terms of working with the Amanita Muscaria, um not even working with the Amanita Muscaria, just taking time to actually listen to other people, and
mm,
and feel from that space what is being called. Do they just want you to listen? Do they want some guidance? Do they need some support right now? And too often, I have, and still am, been not present and too much in the head, and I miss these moments in life where, oh, maybe I could have spent more time with that person. Maybe I could have, shared a little bit more. It's Yeah, it's really been a very interesting time, especially just with the nature of how Amanita works. I feel for many people, in terms of the biggest thing is that the gift that I have received, and I feel it's also available for everybody else in some sense, is that of presence, and that of, um in this busy mind, in this busy world, reducing that noise to a place of stillness where we can then find, more often than not, our natural state of being. And from that place, giving back is more sincere, it's more uh, genuine. That's kind of how I kind of look at reciprocity.
mm,
In a tangible sense, I have a community, where I do monthly events where people would come, and I share a little bit about the mushroom, a little bit about what's present, and invite them to share, which is really important as well. We'd have some Amanita tea, and then we get into some movement medicine. So that's one of the ways I kind of give back to the community. I also do. I'm just kind of at the start now of going deeper with, putting myself out there to hold space for workshops.
mm,
Um, which would involve the tea, but there's some people who really enjoy. I love music and I love to dance, but there's some people that actually just want the space to have tea, and go into more of a meditative space, and a sharing and connection. So I'm starting to, explore two different kind of arenas there. And then also, I have the shop, and I do one-to-ones with people. So that's a really an incredible opportunity for me to listen, to really, tune into, because I don't go too much into the, I, I like just to, I'm starting to practice more just coming from, an intuitive place where I can listen and share what wants to come through me, more often than when I started off doing coaching. And this still slips into my practice, where it's like, I'm thinking too much, and I have ideas of what I want to say. And the beauty and the magic I feel is, and I'm only really starting to notice this, seep into my beingness, is to, if I can just be more, grounded and present, I don't need to think. Everything will just come true naturally. And there's just trust in building to that place. And that's actually that's now kind of um an exciting place to be because I've never trusted myself so much. And it's just taken a while to get out of my head and more into my body. So, what else can I speak into with regards reciprocity? There's a lot in terms of what I do. Like I left the corporate world around 7 years ago. I was in a well-paid job, and so my whole kind of life now really like the ethos of how I live my life is very much in a surrender state
Mhm.
and in a trust that true surrender to that present moment more often than not I'm able to be an antenna for what I believe what spirit wants to help me contribute to this world.
Mm.
So it's for me, it's less about, I make a little bit of money from these events and from the shop, but for the most part, you know, that's not why I'm doing this. Otherwise, I'd stay in the corporate world and earn a lot more there. So it's not easy um in terms of the I'm sure you've come across it maybe in some of your conversations, the limitations and um, the restrictions and the perception from some of these institutions and governments and so yeah, I have those challenges to deal with and but coming back to the reciprocity, what the joy and just seeing the progress that my clients or people that come to my dance and how they leave, that just you can't put a price on that, and that's just warms my heart, and that's why I do it.
Mm. Mhm. Mm. Mhm. Yeah. Mm. Touching. Thank you.
Mm.
Mm. Mhm. Respect, responsibility, and humbleness are these some of the values that guide you with your relationship, with your um, calling, with Amanita Muscaria? Or would you say there are other values which are more in the foreground? What is your relationship to respect, humbleness, responsibility?
Yes, very much so. And this kind of what comes to mind is this. There's many different threads I could go down here. Is this, you know, I guess life is one big initiation where I feel, um, you know, I'm always learning, I'm always growing, and in that, the I start to have more respect for how I work with this mushroom and how I kind of work with myself with this mushroom and then other people. And that goes right across the board, whether it's like, how I conduct my business, how I go foraging for this mushroom, how I hold space. And there has been a really it's been difficult because this mushroom really she can be a harsh teacher, if you're not behaving yourself, And the mind wants to create stories around certain things that make you feel uncomfortable, that mightn't be living up to the values that you aspire to um, honor, hold. And I think we're all, many of us um, say we have values, but ultimately, there's always a little bit more we can be doing to kind of improve those values in life, And I found it particularly difficult with my relationship with uh, food, coffee, just things that I know Amanita is kind of like saying, hey, if you want me to support you and help you, you have to do some work here as well because we're not agreeing with some of the things you put into your stomach. So that's a classic, simple, tangible example where I'm not being respectful to myself and my container and the because I do feel what I'm learning as well from others is how deeper you can go in all aspects with this mushroom if energetically you are clean. Sorry, physically you're clean, but that obviously helps the energetic body as well. And it's not that I have, I picked that example just to kind of get going with this, but I feel that, you know, it's one of the things that seems to be a bit of a loop for me. It's been one of the probably biggest challenges.
Mm,
Um, I mean, I don't drink alcohol at the moment, I'll say, because I was off it for 3 years and then I kind of the year before I went back on it. And for me, Amanita was not saying no, like rule it completely out, but for this part of your life, you need to take a break from it.
mm,
And there's little kind of messages I get from her in terms of working with other plant medicines as well, where whether it's I feel like my relationship with weed sometimes um,
mhm,
interferes in a negative way to my
mm,
experience with Amanita Muscaria. And so these are all things where I feel she's humbling me. She's kind of like saying, "Hey, if you really want to go to the next level in your consciousness and what you're here to do and gift the world with, well, we can only take you so far." Interestingly, I've noticed that I've been invited to go deeper with the mushroom with other people, but I feel that might happen at some stage, but at the moment I'm going slowly and I have been, and a part of me is kind of like in my comfort zone.
mm,
And then a part of me, like with that slowness of working at a more deeper level with people, but then another part of me thinks that no, these are signals now for you to go deeper with your practice.
mm,
But that again is just like I was talking about previously. I'm still navigating and trying to understand exactly what the message is before, moving into that space. So obviously, huge responsibility comes in that area when you are going to be holding space for other people's, complex trauma.
mm,
And I'm more interested in the energetics of that. So yeah, I'm in training, you could say, and I'm very honored to be. in training, and it seems to be the tread seems to be pulling me that direction, but I'm still just navigating the waters just to find myself first before I make any significant leaps. Just baby steps for now.
Ah, thank you for your openness and your trust and your honesty. Mm, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And now, now I'm coming to your lineage, to your to your Celtic Irish lineage, and whatever you like to share, the mushroom, Amanita Muscaria, this lineage, you, what would you like to share about it?
I've had a disconnection to wanting to learn more about our mythologies and our histories related to Amanita Muscaria. And I come from a very rational, cynical minded, um, to a certain extent, family in terms of their belief system. So I'm kind of like I'm kind of like the dark sheep out of the family. And it wasn't always like that. But anyway, so I suppose if we look at Ireland, the ecology of Ireland going back at least 1,000 years, if not longer, our landscape was covered in forests. Like compared to today, where it's only like 5%, we had probably 95% forest. And these forests would have had fir and birch trees, which, as you know, have a mycorrhizal relationship with Amanita muscaria. So for certain, this mushroom was abundant, you know. So we can kind of make a concrete assumption that Amanita muscaria grew abundantly at one stage in Ireland. And so then we were colonized and we were several times. I mean, the history books evidently show we were colonized by, the Romans and to a certain extent, mixed, stories on that one. But definitely we had the Christian missionaries. So our consciousness was definitely colonized in a different, um, our ideological uh, way of life was changed through the Christian faith. And then England would have colonized us then several times, but most notably around the 10th century. So um, you could look at it just to simplify it as like, two stages of this colonization. One, the bards and the druids, the poet seers, they would have been, and the kings as well. They all would have been. Some people would say wiped out, and brutally killed. And then other people would say, oh, there would have been, let's say, some would have been given the option to merge into society to become a Christian monk. Some of them probably evolved in there, but for the most part, they're they were physically removed in probably not a nice way. And then the other the other thread to this was their whole practices, their knowledge was absorbed by the early Christians.
Mm,
And so our ancient sites, for example, where the Druids would have resided, this is where a lot of our Christian monasteries would have been put on. And, there's a school of thought that these would have been powerful, energetic kind of portals, ley lines, where their practices would have been let's say, somewhat, some would say that the practices in these places, like for example, the Round Tower. Have you ever seen the Round Tower?
No, not
No,
heard
no.
about it. Yeah, happy to.
Yeah, like they're these really tall buildings that like you cannot make sense of why they would build them unless they were just like built purposely for lookout towers. But that story just doesn't add up fully. Just in terms of when you get closer to them, and I said, well, they could just go up on that hill, but they seem more like energetic portals for me. Anyhow, and there's no in our history books, there is it's like the Druids and the Fila and the Bards, they get like a little footnote in our history books. Like we were, they really don't get. They're kind of just plotted away alongside the fairy tales and the folklore until recently, which we'll touch into. So I guess yeah, what survived here is quite remarkable because if you think about Germany and Central Europe, and compared to Ireland, we've actually retained quite a lot of our poetry and stories because they would have been very fond of the oral tradition. And one part of that would have been for fear of the colonization. And like, they would have guarded their sacraments fiercely for fear of it being what ultimately, unfortunately, seems to have happened, taken advantage of and used for, I don't want to say nefarious purposes, because I'm sure there were probably good and bad druids as well, you know. Um, so there was this Celtic scholar called Alexia. I can't think of his second name, but anyway, he did a lot of deep work um, on folk references in Scotland and Ireland. And there's a lot of similarities in terms of Scotland, Ireland, and Wales
Mhm.
around this word called Brak, which translates to the speckled snake.
Um,
So, this speckled snake, it would have been in Cormac's Glossary, a 10th century book, and it would have it would have been mentioned in context of our Saint Paddy uh, coming to Ireland, and his mission was to banish the snakes. And sure, we know that Ireland didn't have any snakes, I think at least until the last ice age. So if we're to believe that, well, then what were these uh, snakes? What that he was banishing? And so the speckled snake is kind of it's very interesting because it was associated in this book where the Philly would have used it in the context of invoking pagan gods. So you're the goddess Bridget, Lou, and many others. And so yeah, we would have been a our pagan past, our indigenous belief system would have been polytheistic, theistic, whereas obviously the Christian is mono. And so this would have been a slow rupture to our kind of ways of life. I mean, it was the mushroom. I kind of sense, I wonder if the forests were destroyed for that reason, so they could actually, see what's going on in the land, and actually potentially, this might be a bit, fantastical kind of me to kind of inquire that way. But the more I kind of look into it, I see that perhaps, our livelihoods, the ancient sites being built over these powerful portals, and the ancient knowledge being just taken away because the mushrooms are not there, because the forests have been taken. A part of me thinks that may have been intentional. But what we can, I suppose, there's evidence through these practices that were called in in that 10th century book. There's evidence that Patrick, or at least it's stated that Patrick removed two of these visionary future prophecy practices where they would have gone into these, let's say, trance-inducing states in these, let's say, huts, in these kind of dark kind of caverns. So they were called an Tainum Lade, which means to crack open. It's got various different kind of interpretations. To crack open a nut, but to crack open also, I think it's the fire. And then, oh, the imbos is the fire. So imbos forostni was the name of the other practice that was banished by Padraig, and that means divination that enlightens. So I guess these practices were divinatory, and they would involve the. This is what's really key, and this is what I'm kind of very excited about going deeper with. That they used a language that was carefully coded around crimson foods, berries, red berries, and the hazelnuts that would drop wisdom into the salmon's flesh, and then golden apples. And these foods all, they're crimson. They would be explained as dream inducing deep visions of the future where questions were answered. And so, and the Druids, even the Christian monks, even though it's less written about, but I sense that this practice may have continued in early Christianity as well. And there is also the school of thought that, once it might have taken just like 400 years to sear the head of these practices in Bosphorosnai and Taina Leda. And so what do we know just in terms of about the pharmacological um properties? This was really interesting, and I couldn't see any of these scholars that um, Timothy and Lowry wrote this paper of Amanita Irish myths. I'm not sure if you've got a copy of it, but it's fantastic. I think you'd really enjoy reading it, and it brings all together, the worldview, and the other kind of literacy evidence of the Siberians, and referencing to the the riddles and the hidden word in the Irish poetry and the Irish stories. And what we learn is, the fresh raw ingestion of the Amanita, of where you get most of the ibotonic, is excitatory, it's agitatory, it brings a kind of like ecstatic wildness, um, and especially depending on dosage and all. And so this was actually mentioned in, like, the Fina would be fearless going into battle, and we can compare this, to the Nordic berserkers, where there's evidence also in literary books where they would have used this before battle, and they were kind of crazed and wild. And then if we look over at Egypt and Jerusalem, there's also now evidence to suggest that the Sicarii, the the Essenes, the Zealots would have also had these kind of mushroom cults potentially, where they would have been seen as wild, crazy killer. Like quite negative press is written about this, but I don't think they're counterbalancing with the other pharmacological side of the Amanita muscaria, which is the muscimol, which I sense from learning about the druids and the Phila, where they would go into these deep dream-inducing spaces, and my own comparing it to my own lived experience of having experienced both sides of the mushroom. It sounds like the druids were leaning more into the muscimol side, the meditative side, and that really lines up with, like, the magical berries and salmon that would give you knowledge and wisdom, like, for the future. And so it's all starting to my indigenous past is starting to make a little bit more sense for the first time. And that's really exciting, that line of inquiry, and being able to pattern match some of these things that I don't think I mean, I've obviously been leaning in on, people from the Congress and then various other wisdom keepers and historians and scholars, but I'm starting to see that there is so much to explore here, especially on this island of Ireland. And there is actually just a wealth of knowledge there that these scholars have brought forward that I just think in time is going to reveal a lot more. And I'm just scratching the surface, but that's just a little bit about yeah, what's coming through right now for me to share.
Mm, yeah, that, yeah, it feels so rich that that's a lot of there's a lot of content for future um podcasts, workshops, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So just for you personally, this relationship with Amanita these past 6 years, um, does it connect you with this Celtic Irish lineage that you carry?
Hmm. It does now, but as I mentioned, there is still this.
Hmm.
We'll see now, like, what will emerge in the coming days and weeks. But you know, there wasn't a natural, like, I mean, I've been working with this mushroom for 6 years, and there wasn't this natural, even though, like, it presented itself so many times, and it worked so many wonders on my health and my beingness. But yet there was this resistance to go into the Irish indigenous connection, um, for probably deeper reasons related to, um, maybe a trauma, maybe being something kind of, maybe a fear as well of some kind of knowing or understanding. And now, by proxy of me being invited to, interviews and talks like this, and I feel more, I feel more connected, more related to what I'm uncovering. And that's incredibly exciting. It's like I'm living in my own little Amanita, like, fantasy, like, working with this mushroom. And because it is, it really is. Like, if I was to, I often kind of giggle to myself, Well, I actually just take a breath and look at where I am in life. And if I was to actually, design the life that am living right now, this would be it. I mean, like, I couldn't have created a better story for me. I mean, you have to accept also the discomfort which where the growth takes you. Obviously, that's not enjoyable, but when you're able to step back and just see where it potentially is all going,
Mm,
and even remove out that last part where it's all going, where it is now, you know, and just be grateful and humble that you are living and breathing this experience with this mushroom. And it's just, yeah, words can't explain just how grateful I am for this initiation. Yeah.
mm, what a beautiful full circle.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
a nice way to conclude, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything you wish that you'd like to share so that for you too it feels like a full circle, or is it good?
Yeah, I do feel there's also another thread that I find interesting that and that is the timing of this mushroom coming into popularity, into our consciousness, um, feels also uncanny.
Mm,
And I feel that's significant, and that also brings me optimism for the future as well, that there is a bigger story happening that's kind of incomprehensible to the naked eye. And uh, I trust that story. I mean, I feel that my lived experience to now, especially in the last 7 years, has been a story in itself that is a part of a bigger story. And it leads me to believe that we're going to be okay, you know, and to have fun, really have fun, amidst all the chaos. Um, because I think that's what Amanita wants. Like, it wants us to actually experience joy more often than not, and kind of separate from that what you can't control, and just kind of stay in your own lane and do the best with that which what you can. Yeah, so I think that's a nice way to finish for now.
mm, yeah, thank you. Thank you again for, as I said before, I mean, for being here, s- for giving this time, your time, your energy, but especially for sharing um, your thoughts, your truth in such an honest and open way. Deeply touching. Thank you. Deeply appreciated.
Guramila, thank you so much, Nora. Really
Mm,
appreciate you trusting and giving me the opportunity to share today. Really
mm,
enjoyed it, and I'm very excited uh, to witness you being interviewed, to hear all your amazing
oh,
insights of everything that's been shared and what you worked upon and all the patterns you're noticing. I think that's going to be important.
Oh, thank you. I hear you with that. Thank you for that. And maybe I've talked with you, you've talked about reciprocity. How can this research be of service to you?
Yeah, wow, wow. Well, it already is, and I'm so I'm getting through it slowly, and I'm sure we can maybe have another conversation outside of this and just more kind of sharing our knowledge and conclusions and conclusions, I guess, is only kind of a momentary thing because everything's in flux, everything's always changing. But yeah, I'd love that opportunity at some stage because Amanita seems to be calling me in to go deeper and deeper.